The galaxy was burning, though most people only saw it through scattered reports. Star systems far from the great capitals were crushed, villages turned to ash, and fleets swept across the stars. It was called the Empress War, a conflict that pulled in entire civilizations. Yet for one human, it began not with a battle but with a sound. A cry so small, so weak, that most would have walked past it. He had been wandering the edge of a ruined colony, smoke rising into the alien sky, searching for survivors. His boots crunched against shattered metal, the smell of burned machines thick in the air. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the crackle of flames. Then he heard it, a faint, trembling sound from under a broken wall. He pushed aside twisted steel and broken stone, and found a creature barely alive. It was small, no bigger than his arms, its fur matted, glowing faintly with streaks of blue light. Its eyes were half shut, but they still carried a strange fire inside them. The human froze. He recognized the creature. It was an Empress feline cub, a beast born only to the royal bloodline of one of the most powerful alien dynasties in the galaxy. These beasts were not pets. They were warlords in flesh, meant to grow into towering predators feared across worlds. And yet, this one had been left behind, forgotten in the chaos of war. Its breathing was shallow, its ribs showing, its cries weak. The human felt his hand tighten around his weapon, his instincts telling him to step away, to leave it. He had heard stories of these beasts, how even as cubs they carried the blood of monsters. To raise one was to invite death, but he did not move away. He crouched, watching the cub struggle to breathe, and something inside him shifted. It wasn't logic. It wasn't strategy. It was something older, simpler. He could not leave a life like this, not when it still fought to live. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped the cub gently, ignoring the heat of its glowing body, and carried it against his chest. The journey back to his small camp was not easy. Every sound made the cub stir, every shadow made him tense. He had little food, and yet each day he shared what little he had with it. He found himself speaking to it in the long nights, whispering stories as the fires burned low. The cub never answered, but its glowing eyes slowly began to follow him. Days passed. The cub grew stronger. Its cries turned into low growls. It would stumble after him clumsily on oversized paws, its fur glowing brighter each day. He fed it scraps of dried meat, water from the streams, and whatever he could hunt. In return, it watched him, always watched him, as though it was memorizing his face, his voice, his smell. But whispers began to spread. Others who roamed the ruined colonies saw him, a human with a glowing beast at his side. Soldiers fleeing the front lines whispered his name, saying he carried an Empress cub. And where rumors spread, danger followed. One night, under a storm-filled sky, the human woke to the sound of movement outside his camp. He rose silently, weapon in hand, and peered into the shadows. Figures were approaching, their eyes glinting in the rain. Raiders, scavengers, deserters, men who hunted not for food but for power. They had heard the same whispers. They had come not for him, but for the cub. The cub growled beside him, its fur sparking faint light in the darkness. It was still too small to fight, but it sensed danger. The human placed a hand on its head, steadying it. He knew what these men wanted. To kill him, take the cub, and sell it to the highest bidder. A living weapon raised by no one but greed. The raiders stepped closer, voices low, weapons ready. "Hand it over," one called. "That beast is worth more than your life." The human tightened his grip on his rifle. His mind raced. He had no army, no fleet, no backup. Only himself and the small glowing cub that pressed closer to his leg. For a long moment, he thought of surrender. To give it up. To save himself. But as he looked down at the cub, shivering under the storm, he knew he could not. Not after saving it. Not after carrying it. Not after hearing its cries in the ruins. He raised his weapon, rain dripping down his face, and spoke only one word. No. The storm broke above them, lightning flashing, thunder shaking the ground. The cub let out a sound, not a cry, but a roar. Small, weak, but filled with something ancient and powerful. The raiders hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. And in that moment, the human moved. The battle for survival had begun. The rain poured down in heavy sheets, blurring the night. The raiders moved forward with sharp blades and rusted rifles, their eyes locked on the glowing cub pressed against the human's leg. They thought he was a fool, a man who had picked up death and tried to raise it. But the human did not move back. He kept his rifle steady, watching every shift of their boots in the mud. The first raider lunged, screaming over the storm. The human fired once. The shot cracked through the night, and the man fell into the mud. The cub growled louder, its small body glowing brighter, as if feeding on the tension. The other raiders hesitated, surprised by his speed. But greed burned away their fear. They circled him, hoping to rush at once and drag him down. He backed toward a fallen tree, forcing them to come from the front. His heart hammered, but his hands stayed steady. He had fought before. He had lived too long in broken colonies not to know survival. But this time it was different. He wasn't fighting for scraps or for himself. He was fighting for the life of the creature beside him. A blade flashed in the rain. He blocked it with the butt of his rifle, then struck back, knocking another man to the ground. The cub leapt clumsily, its tiny claws sinking into the arm of a raider. The man howled, trying to tear it off, but the cub clung like fire, glowing brighter as if fury had awakened in its blood. The human seized the moment. Another shot, another body fell. The others fled into the storm, their courage broken. In the silence that followed, only the rain and the cub's breathing could be heard. The human knelt, prying the cub's claws from the dead man's arm. It looked up at him with glowing eyes, chest heaving, fur wet with rain. He expected to see fear. Instead, he saw trust. From that night on, the cub was never far from him. It followed his steps, learned his voice, and watched every movement. As weeks passed, it grew faster, stronger. Its body stretched, fur thickened, and the glowing lines along its frame pulsed with new strength. Where once it had stumbled, now it moved with a hunter's grace. The human built a camp in the ruins of an old tower, walls of broken stone giving shelter from storms. He hunted for both of them, teaching the cub how to stalk prey, how to listen to the wind. At first, it was clumsy, crashing through bushes. But slowly, its paws grew silent, its body moving low and patient. The human smiled the first time it brought down a wild bird on its own, glowing eyes proud as it placed the kill before him, but whispers carried farther than he could stop. Traders spoke of the man who walked with an Empress beast. Soldiers muttered of a human who had stolen royal blood. And the wrong ears began to listen. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, he heard the whine of engines. Ships, small but fast, cutting through the clouds. He grabbed his gear, heart pounding. They had found him. Not raiders this time. No, these were professionals. Soldiers or hunters trained and paid. The cub, now the size of a large wolf, growled low, fur glowing like fire under the fading light. The human touched its head. Stay close. The ships landed outside the ruins, dust and smoke rising. Figures in armor stepped out, weapons sleek and deadly. Their leader's voice echoed through the ruins. Human, surrender the beast. It belongs to the throne. Hand it over, and you may live. The human's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. They would take the cub back to the Empress's armies, raise it into a weapon, strip away everything it had become beside him. It would be turned into nothing but a tool of war. The cub pressed against him, growling, glowing brighter. It didn't understand the words, but it understood the threat. The human lifted his rifle, not as a soldier of any empire, but as a man who had chosen to protect something greater than himself. He shouted back, voice steady against the fear. "If you want it, you'll have to take us both." The armored figures raised their weapons. The cub roared, louder than before, the sound shaking the ruins. And for the first time, the human felt that the beast at his side was no longer a cub. It was becoming something else, something the galaxy had not yet seen. The first shot rang out. The war for the cub's future had begun. The ruins shook with the force of the battle. Blaster fire streaked across the broken stones, shattering walls and sending sparks into the air. The human rolled behind a collapsed pillar, pulling the cub close. Its glowing body pulsed with light, every breath making its chest rumble with a deeper, more dangerous growl than before. The armored soldiers spread out with practiced precision. They weren't raiders. They were trained hunters, moving as one, covering angles, cutting off escape. Their leader pointed toward the human's position, shouting orders. "Box him in. Do not harm the beast. The Empress wants it alive." The cub's ears twitched, and its glowing eyes narrowed. It didn't need words to understand. It felt the danger. It felt the threat to its bond. Its body quivered with rage. The human pressed his hand against its fur. "Not yet," he whispered. His voice was calm, but his heart pounded. He knew the truth. He couldn't win a stand-up fight. Not against trained soldiers with better weapons. But running wasn't possible either. A soldier advanced through the rubble, scanning with a glowing visor. The cub crouched, muscles tight, fur glowing like fire in the dusk. The human raised his rifle, took a breath, and fired. The shot hit the soldier square in the chest. The man fell, his armor sparking, smoke rising. The sound echoed through the ruins. The hunters shouted, returning fire. Blaster bolts slammed into the stone, spraying shards everywhere. The human ducked, pulling the cub low, but the beast had other plans. It leapt forward, glowing claws flashing in the dark. The soldier nearest never had a chance. The cub slammed into him, knocking him flat. Its glowing fangs snapped down on his weapon arm, crushing metal and bone. The soldier screamed, trying to shake it off, but the cub held tight, its glowing body alive with fury. Another soldier rushed in, blade raised, but the human was there first. He swung his rifle like a club, striking the man across the helmet, sending him crashing into the wall. The fight turned wild. The cub darted through rubble, striking with claws and teeth, its movements faster than anything its size should manage. The hunters fired, but the glow made them hesitate. None wanted to risk hitting the very prize they had come for. That hesitation cost them dearly. One by one, they fell to rifle shots, to claws, to the storm that man and beast unleashed together. When silence finally came, the ruins smelled of smoke and blood. Bodies lay scattered across the stone, their weapons useless in the mud. The cub stood on a broken wall, its glowing eyes scanning the field, chest heaving with power. It was larger now, its form swelling with each passing day, as if survival itself was feeding its growth. The human lowered his weapon, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the beast he had once carried in his arms. It looked back at him, fur glowing with streaks of living light. For a long moment, they only stared at each other. In that silence, a truth settled between them. This was no longer a cub. This was the beginning of something greater, something the galaxy had not prepared for. But the battle was not without cost. He knew the fight had drawn attention. These hunters had not come alone. If they found him here, others would follow. The Empress herself might already know. And if she sent her fleets, nothing could hide them. That night by the fire, he watched the beast curl beside him. It rested its massive head against his shoulder, its glowing breath warming the cold air. Once, it had been weak, forgotten, left to die. Now it had teeth sharp enough to tear steel and claws that glowed like burning blades. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "They'll never stop hunting you." The beast's eyes opened, glowing in the dark. It rumbled low, as if answering. It did not fear. It only waited. Days later, the human saw proof of what he feared. From a hilltop, he spotted lights in the sky. Warships, their silhouettes cutting across the stars. Not raiders, not small hunters this time. These were ships of the throne itself. The Empress's banners burned bright on their hulls, a sign that the dynasty wanted its lost cub back. The human felt his chest tighten. He had saved the beast once. He had fought for it twice. But now, the galaxy itself was coming. And this time, it would not be a handful of raiders or hunters. It would be armies. He looked at the glowing beast beside him, standing tall, its eyes fixed on the distant fleet. He realized then that the galaxy did not yet fear them. Not truly. But it would, because he would not give it up. The sky was filled with fire. Warships moved above the clouds like shadows of giants, their engines humming low across the land. Villages far away lit up as beams of light rained down, cleansing the ground. People scattered like ants, but there was nowhere to run. When the Empress sent her fleets, she meant to leave no trace. The human stood on the ridge, cloak whipping in the wind. Beside him, the beast crouched, glowing brighter than ever. It had grown to the size of a great predator, its fur streaked with light like living fire. The sight of the ships made its eyes narrow, a low growl rising in its throat. He knew what this meant. The Empress had learned. This was no longer rumor or whispers in the dark. This was a hunt led by the throne itself. And if they captured the beast, its life would be nothing but chains and war. They descended at dusk. Dropships broke away from the massive fleet, their wings red with heat, landing in a ring around the ruins. Soldiers spilled out in perfect order, their armor gleaming silver, banners of the throne glowing bright. These were not raiders or mercenaries. They were legionaries of the dynasty, the best trained force in the sector. The human tightened his grip on his rifle. He had survived many battles, but never against numbers like these. He glanced at the beast, its glowing mane standing tall, sparks flashing along its body as though the air itself bent around it. The sight gave him strength. The commander of the legionaries stepped forward, helmet polished, cloak trailing behind. His voice carried across the ruins, deep and cold. "Human, you hold what is not yours. The Empress demands the return of her cub. Hand it over, and your death will be swift. Resist, and the galaxy will not remember your name." The human almost laughed. He had no name worth remembering. He was no king, no soldier of glory. Just one man who had carried a dying cub through fire and ruin. But he looked at the beast beside him, standing tall against the armies of an empire, and his voice was firm. "If you want it, come and take it." The commander raised his hand. Dozens of soldiers leveled their rifles. The air trembled with the charge of energy weapons. Then came silence, the moment before thunder. The beast roared. It was no cub's cry this time. It was a roar that split the air, that shook the ground, that made birds scatter from the trees miles away. The glow along its body erupted like fire, and the earth beneath its paws cracked from the force. The legionaries faltered. Even trained soldiers, even men hardened by war, felt their hands shake at the sound. Then the battle began. Blaster fire cut through the ruins, bolts slamming into stone. The human dived for cover, firing back in quick bursts. The beast lunged forward, faster than the soldiers expected, glowing claws tearing through armor like paper. Screams filled the air as the front line broke. The legionaries tried to regroup, forming walls of shields, pushing forward step by step. But the beast was too fast, too fierce. It struck from the side, tearing through ranks, scattering men like leaves in the storm. The human moved with it, shooting those who tried to flank, covering its blind spots. Together they fought as one, but numbers weighed heavy. More soldiers poured from the dropships, wave after wave, their discipline holding even as their fear grew. The human's rifle grew hot, his arms aching, his lungs burning with smoke. Still he fought, every shot buying another second for the beast to strike. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The ground was slick with rain and blood. Fires burned high, shadows dancing across broken walls. The legionaries had lost many, but still they pressed on. Chanting the Empress's name as if it could protect them, the beast stood over their fallen, glowing brighter than the fires around it, chest heaving, eyes burning with fury. The humans staggered beside it, wounded but unbroken. The battlefield fell silent as the surviving soldiers pulled back, forming a wall between the ruins and their commander. The man in silver armor stepped forward again, unshaken, his voice hard as stone. "You think you have won, human? You think your beast makes you strong? This was only a test. The Empress herself is coming. And when she arrives, not even your monster will save you." The human said nothing. His chest rose and fell, blood dripping from a cut along his arm. He placed his hand on the beast's shoulder, feeling its strength, its warmth. He knew the commander's words were true. The Empress would come, and with her, fleets that no man could stand against. Yet as he looked at the glowing creature beside him, standing tall against armies, he felt no fear. For he realized something the Empress did not. This was not her cub anymore. This was his beast. And together, they were something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The stars above shifted as a shadow even larger than the warships appeared. It was no ordinary vessel. It was the Empress's flagship, a fortress that blotted out the sky, its hull carved with glowing runes of power and history. Entire fleets bowed before its passage, for it carried not only weapons but the weight of a dynasty. The human stood among the ruins, his rifle low, his body aching from the last battle. Beside him, the beast prowled restlessly, its glowing fur sparking against the night. The soldiers who had survived now stood still, silent, their eyes fixed on the sky. Even they seemed uneasy. For when the Empress came in person, it was not victory she wanted, it was a lesson. The flagship landed beyond the ridge, and a ramp descended. Out stepped a woman in robes of deep crimson, her crown of steel set with living gems. Her presence filled the air like a storm. She did not shout, nor need soldiers to announce her. Every being on that battlefield felt the weight of her gaze. The beast growled low, its glowing eyes locked on her. The Empress smiled faintly, her voice calm yet sharp as a blade. "So this is where you've been hiding, little one." Her words were not for the human. They were for the creature at his side. The human stepped forward, keeping himself between her and the beast. His voice was steady, though his heart raced. "It isn't yours anymore." The Empress's laughter rang out, cold and cruel. "Do you think you've changed it, human? That thing carries royal blood. It was bred to command armies, to burn worlds. You cannot tame what was born to rule." The beast's growl deepened, its glowing mane flaring. It pressed against the human side, not in fear, but in defiance. For months, it had grown with him. Fed by his hand, guided by his voice, it had learned more than violence. It had learned loyalty. The Empress raised her hand, and soldiers surged forward once more, their armor gleaming under the light of the burning ruins. The human lifted his rifle, the beast lowered itself to strike. But before the clash could begin, the Empress spoke a single word in the ancient tongue of her people. The beast froze. Its body trembled, eyes flickering. The human turned in shock. The glow of its fur dimmed for a moment, as if an invisible chain had wrapped around it. The Empress smiled cruelly. "Blood remembers, human. You cannot erase what it is. It will bow to me as it was born to." "No," the human said firmly, stepping closer to the beast. His voice cut through the storm. "You're not hers." The beast's body shook violently, torn between two forces, blood and bond. Sparks burst from its glowing lines, its roar trapped inside its chest. The Empress's soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons, ready to strike the moment it fell under her command. The human reached out, pressing his hand against its muzzle. His voice softened. "Remember the ruins. Remember the hunger. Remember when no one came but me." The beast's glowing eyes locked on his, trembling. For a breath, silence ruled the battlefield. Then the roar came. It was louder than before, shattering the invisible hold. The beast's glow erupted like a star, brighter than fire, brighter than the ships above. The Empress's soldiers staggered back, shielding their faces. The Empress herself narrowed her eyes, her cruel smile fading. The bond had won. The cub was no longer hers. The beast stood tall, towering now. Its body stretched to its true form, muscles thick, claws burning with light, fangs gleaming like molten steel. The ground shook as it moved, its roar echoing across valleys. The galaxy had feared the dynasty's beasts before. But this was something greater. A creature that had chosen not blood, not throne, but a human. The Empress's eyes darkened. For the first time, her voice carried anger. "Then you have made an enemy of the throne itself." She raised her hand, and from the flagship, engines roared. More ships rose, weapons powering, fleets aligning for war. The human stood beside the glowing beast, rifle in hand, body ready, though broken from battle. He looked up at the endless sky filled with fire and fleets, and he did not move. The Empress had brought her armies. But so had he. His army was only one. One beast born of royal blood, fed by human hands, raised in fire and ruin. But the galaxy would soon learn that was enough. The battlefield was silent for only a breath. Then the skies roared as fleets above shifted into formation. Hundreds of warships moved as one, their cannons glowing, preparing to fire upon the ruins below. The Empress stood tall at the front of her soldiers, her crimson robes snapping in the storm, her crown gleaming with the light of 1,000 weapons. The human felt the heat of the glowing beast beside him, its body blazing with energy, its chest rising and falling like a furnace. Once it had been small enough to cradle in his arms. Now it towered above him, a predator of light and fire. Yet it pressed its head low toward him as if waiting for his command. The Empress raised her hand, her voice sharp and merciless. "Bow to me or burn with him." The human wiped blood from his face and looked at her without fear. "We don't bow." The first volley came. Blinding beams of energy rained down from the sky, slamming into the ruins, ripping earth and stone apart. But before they could strike the human, the beast moved. With a roar that shook the stars, it leapt upward, its body glowing brighter than the beams themselves. The energy weapon struck its glowing hide and shattered like glass. The beast absorbed the power, its fur sparking with white fire, its roar growing deeper, stronger, unstoppable. The fleets above faltered. Weapons meant to destroy cities had done nothing. The Empress's eyes widened, her calm mask cracking for the first time. The beast landed heavily, the ground splitting beneath its claws. It turned its blazing eyes to the sky and roared again, a sound that rattled the bones of every soldier, every pilot, every being who heard it across the battlefield. The warships shuddered and some pulled back without orders, their captains gripped by fear. The Empress shouted, her voice trembling with fury. "Stand your ground. It is ours." But even as she commanded, her soldiers wavered. Some fell to their knees, weapons slipping from their hands, unable to face the living storm before them. The human stood at the beast's side, his rifle forgotten. He no longer needed it. He placed his hand against its burning fur, feeling its strength flow into him. Together, man and beast walked forward through the army of the throne. Soldiers tried to stand, but the sight of the beast's glowing claws and burning eyes broke them. They fled, scattering into the ruins. The Empress remained, her crown gleaming, her fury burning. She lifted a blade carved with ancient power, its edge humming with energy. She stepped forward, no longer speaking to her soldiers, but to the human. You have stolen what is mine. Do you think history will remember you? Do you think you can defy the throne? The human met her gaze, steady as stone. I didn't steal anything. You abandoned it. I raised it. The Empress struck. Her blade cut through the air with the force of thunder. But the beast moved faster. Its claw met the blade, sparks erupting as ancient steel clashed with glowing fury. With a roar, the beast shattered the Empress's weapon, fragments scattering like falling stars. The Empress fell back, stunned. For the first time in her reign, she looked small, powerless before something she could not control. The beast loomed over her, its glowing jaws opening wide, its roar making the earth tremble. But the human stepped forward, raising his hand. The beast froze, its fire burning but held in check. He looked at the Empress, her crown broken, her soldiers scattered, her fleets retreating in fear. His voice was calm, steady, final. Go back to your throne. Tell your galaxy what you saw here. Tell them it is no longer yours to fear. It is ours. The Empress's eyes blazed with hatred, but also with something she had never known before: fear. She turned, gathering what was left of her soldiers, retreating to her flagship. The fleets pulled away, shrinking into the dark sky, leaving the ruins in silence. The human sat heavily on the broken stone, exhausted. The beast curled beside him, lowering its massive head until it rested against his side. Its glowing fur dimmed softly, no longer blazing with war but warm with peace. He placed his hand on its muzzle, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to breathe. The galaxy would whisper of this night. Not of the Empress's fleets or her crown of steel. Not of her endless armies. They would whisper of a forgotten cub raised by human hands, of a beast that defied empires, and of the man who walked at its side dotting slowly across stars and worlds. The galaxy would begin to fear not the Empress's throne, but the bond between human and beast.